What's it like to lose your only baby in midlife? To lose your toddler to a traumatic drowning accident, your only child, one that you have been hoping and praying to God for a long time, and to lose her suddenly. How did this young mother handle her grief, and how has she championed that cause as a community leader to help other families? It's your girl Tisha, your midlife makeover maven. And on this episode, we will be speaking with our guest, Tremelle Howard, Esquire. And we'll be talking about her journey and how she got through her grief and how she's using that for good.
Thank you,
Welcome,
Tisha.
Tremelle Howard. Thank you so much. We are talking to Tremelle Howard, Esquire, also author, and just a community champion, and probably one of my greatest heroes. That sometimes you have people close to you, and you have no idea how much just standing in your own light impacts other people. And Tremelle, you have been that for me, and I thank you for that. So let's
Thank
get
you.
into it. Talk a little bit about yourself and um, tell a little bit about your story.
Sure. Well, I was living life, just minding my business in 2012. It was, in the summertime, having a good time. Was married with one child, Michaela Courtney, 4 years old. She was just about to be five. Her birthday is July 10th. And so we were in the midst of planning that big, that 5 year birthday that we usually highlight in our community. And so we were planning that, and then the unthinkable happened. Michaela was visiting a home of a family friend, and she there was a pool there, and she went into that pool unbeknownst to the adults at the home, and they didn't hear her go in. And when they turned their attention back to the pool, she was already in, and it was essentially too late. I mean, they did retrieve her from the pool, tried to do CPR and the like, and she didn't make it. And that happened hundreds and hundreds of miles away. I was in Douglasville, and she was in South Florida,
Mm.
and so to get the call that there's been an accident and that she'd been in a pool accident. I mean, I didn't think fatal. I thought, oh, she cut her leg at the pool, something like that, not drowning. And I went home. Oddly enough, I was in church at the time with a friend. And I left there, went home, and then some friends came, they're kind of like waiting with me while we're trying to figure it out. And then got the worst call, which was that she didn't make it. And so that really just turned life upside down. And you know since it's been almost 11, 12 years since that day. And um I'm just still standing, as I would say. I'm here. I thank God for my faith, family, and friends, because that is really what has kept me.
Oh. So you, and I've got to plug this, you've championed your book here, Still Standing, and people who know me knows I read, I got, these little tabs.
I see
So
your little tabs, yes.
okay, we're going to get in. It's called Still Standing, Blessings, Burdens, and Brighter Days After the Loss of a Child. Whew. I understand after reading your book, the impact that Michaela's death has had on you. You want to talk a little bit about, the journey from, you know, where you were then to kind of where you are now. Let's talk a little about it. It was a day like no other day. You were out, you were doing your community service, you were going to church, you were in your full social life, but you had some feelings about whether or not you should have been on that trip with her. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So, we all have to make those decisions. And I was had recently gotten a promotion and had just gotten off of a big case, and was still just trying to get, things in order at work. And Um, and Michaela had just gotten out of school. So she had gotten out of school late May, and now she was going to go visit her grandma. And when the trip came up, it was like, well, this is the right time for me. And why don't you all go? And she and her dad, they did like to go travel. Like it was like a cute thing. I'm going to travel with my daddy. So I stayed back and they traveled to Florida. But I did have that, those questions, that regret of, if I had been there, because I mean, if I had been there, she would be alive. Or if God had determined that that was her time, it would have been another way. But it wouldn't have been because somebody was now watching her in the pool. And I struggled with that. I did go to counseling, after Michaela's passing and talked about it with the counselor. And, she, of course, as any good counselor would be assuring me that, look, we got to work. Like, these things that we have don't come just because we sitting pretty. Somebody we got to do the work, and parents have to work. And so you weren't making any decision that was irresponsible. But at the time, you have all those questions. And so I would just encourage anyone, I'm not here to give you all of the churchy statements or the guru statements that people give, like you're going to be all right. But just know that if you didn't put your loved one or that special person in that situation, don't blame yourself.
Mhm.
Don't blame yourself,
So
is
that
what
goes
I would say.
that goes back to what you mentioned in the book about, for oftentimes we have a plan. We have a plan for how we're going to live our life. Okay, by this point, I'm gonna have this degree. By this point, I'm gonna have this house. By this point, I'm gonna be in my career. But this is the time I'm gonna have my children. This is when I'm gonna have the other child, and all of that. You mentioned in the book about having that plan, and it didn't go according to plan. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, I think you laid it out. You have a plan. You want to go to school. You want to get the education. Um, you want to, be married. You want to have children. If you are interested in having children, start your family. And, you have the plan, but God knows best, right? Doesn't mean we don't plan, but it may not always work out. And in this instance, it was like, oh, I kind of did the things that society would say, do this first, do that first, do that first. And for me, my child isn't here. She's in the cemetery. Well, her remains are in the cemetery, but she's gone from this earthly place. And you think, oh, maybe I should have, had children earlier. Maybe she should have gotten married earlier. Maybe I should have been so focused on career. But again, all of us, we come with different gifts, different opportunities and challenges, and we have to do what's best for us and those set of circumstances. And for me, wanting to progress in life, education was something that was really, you know, pressed upon me, my family, like, yeah, hey, you have to get your education first. That's the key component of sort of having a stable life. And I don't regret that. But again, when you're going through a traumatic loss, one that you couldn't prepare for, Michaela wasn't sick. She didn't have any illnesses. You're thinking about all the things that you did and whether you could have done something else that would have, kept her on this earth.
It's interesting. And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that I often felt a lot of guilt because I had a baby as a teen, right? And oh, I could have waited. I wish I would have done it differently. I wish I would have. And it goes back to, God knows best, right? And so no matter how you think it should have gone, whatever God's plan is what God's plan is. And so being able to reverse engineer that. I lived in a lot of shame when I was younger. I wanted to go to college first. I wanted to do it the way you did it. And looking back on it, I think maybe if I had, I might not have children now myself. So, you weigh both sides of it. And if your grounding is not in God, which mine wasn't, I'm working on that now, then you live in a lot of what ifs and there's a lot of guilt sometimes that comes from doing one thing or another. How did
Absolutely.
you, after Michaela passed, how did you kind of navigate things emotionally when she passed away?
Well, I mentioned I went to counseling,
Mhm.
and we did joint counseling, and we did some separate sessions. But again, my faith was a real huge component, my friends and work, to be honest. And whether it was good or bad, I'm sure I stuffed a lot, right? Because I wanted to kind of pick up and keep going. Like, let's not stop. Let's, keep moving. And so that's what I did. I was out of work for, I don't know, 6, 8 weeks. And I went back to work, initially part-time and then full-time. And I just had, my village was just smothering. They were on us, just making sure we were okay, coming to visit. We would have visitors come and stay at the house 1 week, 2 weeks, just to be present, not to tell us what to do or how to do it, but just to be present, um, to be that support. And we were blessed, and for having that, or going to someone's vacation home, just doing stuff. And that's what I tried to do in the beginning. Got very busy in the community, in the sorority, just serving and just putting myself deeply into things that I cared about.
Mhm.
And it did help. And it did give me something to love, to look forward to, but there was still that void. And, there would be times when I could be okay and then get around some familiar faces, some familiar children, and then break down. Because
Yeah.
that's
So
just that's just life.
we're going to unpack that a little bit. When Michaela passed, I didn't know you then, but we have a mutual friend, Robin, who was your neighbor at the time. And I remember, first of all, Robin was totally devastated when Michaela passed. I mean, totally devastated. And I
Yes.
remember her saying that, your village really came in and swooped in and just really kind of took over and allowed you kind of just to live in your
Right.
grief. And I mean, that is a blessing, one of those areas where you made investments before you needed to make some withdrawals. And,
Right.
we don't always get that, right? And you don't necessarily go into it, you have such a beautiful spirit. I'm almost certain you didn't go into those relationships expecting that you were going to need to make a withdrawal. But having those in place for you and having, the sisterhood in place to just give you some breathing room, I'm sure um, that was good. But did you ever feel like with having those people around that you were still alone, or was there a time when you really wanted everybody to leave?
I would say all of that. I think that there it was funny. I was new to my sorority chapter, so I knew people, but I didn't really know them. But that didn't matter. They were like, "Mm-mm." They were like, "What do you need? Let me come write out these thank you cards. Let me go mail these thank you cards. Let me bring you some food." There were times when the doorbell would ring and they say, "Oh, your sorority sister down here." I'm looking down there like, I don't know that person, but listen, they were there, really being what we say we are about. And so I wouldn't have it any other way. Um, I think that that's a lesson, is that you don't know what you need. I didn't have any expectations, so the things that were happening, they were blessings, that they happened. And um, looking back now, I'm so glad that people bogarted their way in, that they didn't let me just say I was okay, because they could see that I wasn't, and that we weren't okay. And so they would come, sometimes it was to do nothing, sometimes it was to make us laugh, let's go get something to eat. But really just having individuals who are also rooted in faith, who knew you don't leave people alone at this time, that they needed, this extra love and just attention. You after a while, you just like, oh, well, when is Cheryl coming around? That was one of my friends. She'd come and scoop you up or come and talk to you and get a phone to George. I want to talk to him. That kind of thing. She was really wanted to make sure that we were okay. And so you don't think you need it, your instinct tells you that I'm okay, but let people love you
Mm.
is
I
what I
love.
would say. Let them be there. And I know there's, I think social media is even beyond what it was in 2012. So folks, they get on with all of the statements and people just being nosy. That we just gonna have to trust God, right? Like I wasn't trying to hide things in the home or trying to be so tidy or try to be this. It was, you know, my child is gone. And so having that support, I really I just received it. And if I didn't want people around, when people would check on me, I would just, I just want to chill today. And people respected that. But me saying that didn't stop them from checking on me the next day.
I love that. I love that. One of the things we talked, or your book talks a lot about, is your root, your foundation in faith. With the loss of your daughter, did you ever question your faith? Did you ever question God?
Question God, no, but talk to him a lot, yes. Right. I mean, I just had so many questions. I think even what was shared on the obituary, I wrote that on a plane flying to go to see the body, right? It's that, you have plans for your children. You expected them, we would tease her all the time because I think I was 33, not 30, no, I was 35, I think, when I had Michaela. And so I was like, oh, you're gonna be pushing us around in our little wheelchair, taking us to the nursing home, that kind of thing. Would tease her all the time. I was a little older than some of my friends who had children, they were 25, married, and rather than, later when you start being high risk, because that's what I was considered. And so yeah, I talked to him a lot. Um, question why? I'm sure I probably did in some space of it, like she's in a loving home, she's safe. Like, why her? I mean, of all the things out here, but then it's like, why not? Why not you? Why not? And so I remember, and I've shared this before as one of my friends, you know, when Michaela passed, and she just said, I don't, God is trusting you with this trouble. I don't know what you've done, that God is trusting you with this. And I always remember that, like, I was being trusted with something that I knew people would be watching. And not that I was trying to do everything right, but I did want people to know that despite the loss, God is still good,
Mm.
right? Despite the loss. And that's hard for a lot of people because if they don't have the relationship, that sounds like foolishness to them. Like, oh yeah, she just, she overwhelmed. But I can tell you that, I've grown up in church since I was like 5 or 6 years old. And that night or the morning before I left to go to Florida to go identify Michaela's body, a song came on, I think is Richard Smallwood or something. And the name of the song is There Will Be Glory After This. I will never forget it. Right.
Mm.
And I couldn't piece it all together at that moment, but that song stayed with me, right? That there's going to be glory after this. And, you know, there were many people who probably came to Michaela's funeral who had not been in church, so there was some witness and some testimony happening in all of that. And so I'm not sure why he used Michaela um, in her life and her testimony in our lives, but um, I'm grateful for the time that she was here because and that little 4-year-old, she did more than I did when I was 4. I had never been on a plane. She'd been on a plane multiple times. She had her little favorite seats, all that. I didn't get on a plane until I was 16,
Mm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
So she had some experiences. I didn't go to Disney World till I was a grown woman. She went when she was 4. So, you know, she had some experiences.
You call the day of Michaela's death her angelversary. Is that how you describe it? Angelversary?
Yes, I did. I described as her angel versary.
Tell me how you plug that name.
Just, trying to turn the bad into good.
Mhm.
Um, I remember going to counseling and the counselor talking about one, like planning your holidays.
Mhm.
She's like, forever you will plan holidays. You may not execute them all, but you should have a plan
Mhm.
because, the grief, it really doesn't take a day off. It'll pop up at any moment and you want to be prepared for the moments when you might all of a sudden start feeling lonely and alone. But the angelversary, like I said, Michaela, she passed on June 16th, and her birthday is July 10th. So right after having to deal with all that, I think the last funeral was June 23rd or 25th. Then two and a half weeks later was her birthday. So
Mm.
here we are. What do we do for her birthday? And I think I saw, folks calling, people who had passed away, angels, although we know they're not really. But for me, it was just, this is her angelversary, you know. And that's what I just started said, hey, we're just going to celebrate her angelversary.
I love that. I love
And
that.
and we've done that.
You mentioned that when Michaela passed, that you and George um got closer. And you said, we kind of, that's all we had. Describe that a little bit.
Broke up a little bit. You said,
I said, you mentioned that shortly after Michaela's passing, you and your husband got closer.
right.
That you kind of, that was all you had. Talk a little bit about what that was like.
Sure. So, this happens and all of a sudden you're in a club you don't want to be in, right? Parents of deceased children. There were just lots of moments where we were just trying to understand things. And because, you're a married couple, but you're also an individual. So you're struggling with the grief differently, but at the same time, also wanting to make sure that each other, that we make it through the grief. And so, just we didn't have any choice but to grow closer during that time because we each needed something different from each other. And so we were just clinging on. I think that kind of kept the sanity
Mhm.
as we were trying to process what had happened. And as back to school day would come and Thanksgiving and Christmas, those first couple of years after Michaela's passing, it was just, we could look at each other without words, know what the other was feeling or thinking about that moment.
Wow. After having gone through that, what happened over that time that really kind of dismantled your marriage, or how did you decide that you were not going to move forward as a couple?
Well, I would say the marriage itself, no marriage is perfect. And so we had our challenges before Michaela's passing. And so I don't think Michaela's passing helped.
Mm.
But it got to a point where we decided to move further, move on, but separately.
Interesting. Did that um did that at all add to the grief of her passing, or did that feel like a new beginning for you?
Well, it's grief itself. Not only does the person who passes away, you lose that person, but you lose other things even in its midst. There were people that I was very close to that I lost, and or people who were just struggling through the grief.
Mhm.
That put a lot of pressure on just me personally. And so I would say that it was still a level of grief because, when you dissolve anything or when you stop something or, that's just, here is another, you know, tick in the coffin, So I would say I wasn't kicking my heels. I think it was, something that I thought I had a plan for it to last and for my child to grow and be there and those two things just happened not to be my reality.
Wow. So I think about the grief of not just losing your child, but even the grief of losing the life that you had envisioned and planned for yourself and the totality of that, right? You look at, well, there's this one piece of grief, but then there's this larger picture that goes with it as well. Thank you for sharing that. What inspired you to start a nonprofit organization in honor of Michaela? And what are its main goals and initiatives?
Well, sure. So, you know, immediately after Michaela passed, there were, many people pushing, oh, what are you going to do? Well, we weren't ready and I wasn't ready. So, I took some time just to think about it. And as we were approaching the 10-year anniversary of her passing, I was feeling sort of like a rebirth, just stronger, and felt like I wanted to do something to impact that space. And so decided to establish the Michaela Cares Foundation, which is a play on her initials, Michaela Courtney Fishburne, if you catch that. And
I didn't. Thanks for pointing that
yeah,
out.
yes, MCF. And so always saying her name. I want to keep her memory alive. And so the mission is to reduce childhood drownings and to support young people who are invested in swimming. And so we provide one, swim gear to children, who are learning to swim. And we also provide free swim lessons, as well as academic scholarships to students who are on swim teams or happen to be a lifeguard or CPR certified, et cetera. And so I just don't want another parent family to go through what I've gone through. And just being in Georgia, as soon as we get to May, you start hearing about children drowning in pools all over again, pools, lakes, ocean, whatever it may be. But the numbers are just astounding, and we want them we want them to go lower. We don't want them to increase. And Black and brown people in particular have a higher incidence of drowning. And I want to be able to make an impact on it.
I love it. Thank you. So we talked about the book you wrote, Still
Yes.
Standing. I'm going to put it up one more time. We'll talk about and we'll put in the show notes how people can get your book. It is a remarkable book. Thank you so much. Tell us about the book, what your intention was, and what motivated you to tell your story in that format.
Well, I knew I wanted to write a book, and because I wanted to be able to help others, I wanted to be able to encourage others. I didn't know how to put it together, how to tell it. Um, and so I struggled with that for a couple of years and went through various sort of outlines of what it might look like. And then was talking to a friend, and I was telling her what I was trying to do. And she was like, oh no, she was very encouraging. You can do this. You probably need to talk to an editor to kind of help get you framing your thoughts. And then I was also scared, you put out a book talking about your life and about something like this, people may judge you about like the motivation. And so I was a little nervous about releasing it. And my goal simply was, one, to share my story. I wanted people to know that what you see right here is not because Tremelle is so special. It's because of God's grace. And if you don't take anything away from still standing, is what I want you to know, that is that I attribute my being able to have some level of success, what I would call success, after Michaela's passing, and that I'm not in a mental health ward, is because of God's grace. It is because that I had a relationship with him, and I'm grateful of sort of, for me, knowing him for myself and being able to come to grips with, this may have happened, but this isn't the end of the story. And so the book is not just, let me tell you about my life. Let me just tell you about Michaela. It's, let me also encourage you as to how you can get through a traumatic incident. And so I offer opportunities for you to jot down some of your thoughts and to write out some action plans, because we need to do that. And I want people to know that there is glory after this. And whatever your this is, there is another side to it. But it does take us really pushing and fighting through all of the thoughts that are in our heads about why we might not be worthy. We've got to every day get up and just believe that you can do it. You're still here. And as a result, that means that there's something for you to do, something for you to say, something for you to impact. And I truly believe that. So for all those parents out there who have lost children, I just encourage you, get you a tribe. It doesn't have to be as many people as I had, but if you just got some good 5 folk, that it really makes a difference to have some people who care about whether or not you show up somewhere.
One of the things that I asked you when I was going through a rough time is, I was like, how do you do it? How are you standing? What are you doing? And the quote is in the book, but do you remember what you told me?
Oh,
I think it was something on the lines, and please, I'm gonna get the quote wrong, but it is, I've had the worst thing imaginable
oh,
happen.
yes.
Yeah, say that quote because it's so profound. I don't want to mess it up.
Yes, right. I said, the worst thing that could have happened to me has already happened. And so when I get those challenging moments, and people will say, well, what could make you stressed out? But I've had some stressed out moments since June 16th, 2012, and where I get unraveled, and then it hits me. The worst thing that could have ever happened has already happened. The devil took his hardest punch, and I'm still standing. And so that is what keeps me. I know, like, okay, the worst thing, it's already happened. So whatever is happening, it might be bad. I can get through it. Because I lost my child over here on the left, and over here on the right, I might lose a person, I might lose a thing. I'll get through it.
And I know that you don't just say that, like you are the
I really
embodiment
mean
of
that.
that. Like yes, I
I
see that.
mean that from the bottom of my heart. And I'm saying it to say, like, seriously, if you just, and I've always been a person that thinks like this, just always the logical piece of something, right? As a person, as a human, if you are a parent and you lose your child, to me, that is the worst thing that could ever happen to any human being, right? Because your children are supposed to bury you. So if that has happened and you have survived it, I don't care what is happening after that, you're going to get through it. It doesn't mean you don't face the thing that's happening after the traumatic incident. It's just a reminder, right? How you hear in church, they would say, I think about what God did for me last year, the year before last. I can still think about that sort of horrible thing that happened. That gives me strength. Sometimes I'm on the treadmill or on that Peloton, and I would just have to channel Michaela. I'm like, I'm doing this for Michaela. I got to be healthy, right? Give me some strength. Like, the worst thing has already happened. You can do it. You can get through it. And when you start saying that, I mean, when I say that to the thing, whatever it might be, I feel so much relief. And it's like, girl, why was you tripping like that? But you do because we're human.
Absolutely.
So if you start hearing the buzz, there's about to be a downsizing. I mean, everybody upset. And then I'm
Right.
like, I'm gonna be all right. I mean, I don't like it, but I am going to be okay.
Right. Right.
So yes.
I imagine it probably produces a level of fearlessness, right? That you're like, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. Interesting.
Right. I mean, but it has really helped me in some times when I felt like somebody was coming after me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
as a human, you have that level of fear. Oh, this person is going to do this to me. They're going to block me from doing X, Y, and Z. And then I would think, your baby is in Westview Cemetery. And all of a sudden it's just, okay, I got this.
Right.
I done
Wa-
stood where most people will never stand. I got this.
Wow.
But again, and it's a talking to, right? I mean, it's you're talking to yourself, right? That's how you have to. You got to empower yourself to be able to put on the armor of
Mm.
God to be able to stand. And I am not exempt from having to encourage myself.
Right. I was thinking about that just as you said it. In what ways has your community involvement in advocacy work helped you along your healing journey?
Oh, the community work. I mean, it's probably it's what kept me alive in 2012, 13, and 14, and 15, because I was busy helping somebody. Just my mother would be like, "Can you please sit down?" Okay, in a minute. I just got this one more thing, but that helped me. I had goals, I had objectives, I had things that I had to accomplish. That is really what kept me. It didn't allow. I didn't have a lot of idle time to think about the what ifs. It doesn't mean that every once in a while did I not lay down, go to sleep, and have a horrible dream about Michaela. Yes, I surely did. Or go to Publix and bump into the classmate and you just break it down, right? Not because you don't want to see the classmate, but because it's a reminder that she isn't growing and possibly about to matriculate, to this level. Um, but yeah.
In your community involvement, there is a lot of focus on legacy. Um, and as you see children, because this is 10, 12 years later, who are coming into the milestones that, Michaela won't see, how do you, because I've seen you be joyous. I mean, I literally have seen you celebrating these other people's children's milestones. How do you manage that grief?
Well, it's not easy. Um, but especially for the children that she knew, I'm excited for them because I'm like, oh my gosh, Michaela would have been. And like, next year would be like her high school year,
Mhm.
right? So, and I've been thinking about, what I'm going to do to commemorate that time. Um, but every day is not a good day. Some days when I scroll on Facebook, I'm sad, but even if I had that moment of sadness, I'll go back and write a special note on the mom's Facebook page or whatever. But it's not easy.
Mhm.
Just keeping it real and 100. It is not easy because, again, when she was born in 2007, you think about, you're like, oh, you'll be such and such. It'll be 2025 when you're 8, those kinds of things. And now she's not here for any of it.
I think the point of me asking you this question is for a lot of moms or for maybe some women or even men who are in your situation. I want them to know that you're going to have those days where, there are people that are celebrating and don't feel bad if you can't celebrate. It's still a difficult thing to do. And it is one of those double-edged swords where you really are in celebration mode for other people and their beautiful milestones. But it still probably, you know, taxes you a little bit in your grief.
Right. And, I would just tweak what you just said. And the one thing is be sad or not, but have a plan. Because that's like we talked about earlier, and I talk about in the book how the counselor, had recommended that we plan the holidays. We have to plan these milestones as holidays as well, which is why I'm already thinking about what, when she would have been turning 18, when she would have been graduating from high school, what am I going to do to keep her name and her memory alive? Right. And so I would say to that parent, one, if you can, find a way to celebrate that best friend, right? Because that's going to help you in ways you can't imagine. And the children. I mean, one of Michaela's, her best friend who lived in the community, I would say she had two best friends, but one lived in Douglas County. And when I would see Corinne when she was a baby, still young, it was like I was a ghost because I don't think she knew what to say. But now we could talk and chit chat and and she's doing pageants and stuff like that, and I get to support her and be a cheerleader there, and she's even taken on pressing the childhood safety and water issue when she does her pageants. So we kind of partnered together there, and so I would say don't shy away from loving those babies, right? Because God has given you an opportunity to just express your love in ways that you hadn't planned. But you still can do it. And you might not feel good on Memorial Day weekend of the day your child was supposed to be having a graduation party. Maybe you need to be on a cruise that weekend. Maybe you need to be on a vacation. You need to do something. Get out of town, go to the cabins, prepare, because the enemy is busy and he wants us to be, or it wants us to be distracted, wants us to be sad, wants us to think that we don't have any options, and when we do have options.
That's powerful because it does put us in the mind that we do have a choice, which means that we could lean into God's word, or we can allow ourselves to be overtaken by the enemy. And what I'm hearing you say is those days are going to come, and having that plan in place allows you to say, not today, devil, not today. You're not getting my mind today. Or even if it's in that moment, like, okay, I had a moment, I'm gonna shake it off. But it is that I have found myself very quite a few times just being dark, just in a dark space, but knowing, like you said, I didn't have a plan. I didn't, and there have been days when I've just forced myself to make a different choice. And I always felt better because of it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other parents who've experienced, a similar tragedy, or and right now are in the midst, like in the high season of their grief and healing?
First, I would say I would recommend counseling. You don't have to go forever, but do a couple of sessions. Um, I would also say, to the best of your ability, try not to isolate. It's easy to do. And in the beginning, your family and friends, after we get through the service and things like that, they don't know what to do. They're just as afraid and intimidated in the space as you are. And unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because there will be some people who will say, well, I'm the one who's lost. As the person who's lost a child, you've got to be the driver for the people who you really care about. I'm not talking about that we have levels of relationships, but the relationships, the close relationships, I found myself having to create the safe space for my family and friends because they were traumatized by Michaela's passing. And so, but when they saw that I was standing up and that I was doing okay, that helped them. And I talked about her and I talk about her, which in the beginning, people were nervous. They didn't want to talk about their children. They didn't want, no, we're not doing that. Not today. We gotta, I want you to be who you are. I'm never going to say, Tisha, I don't want to hear about your grandbaby. But oh, that means I still need some counseling. Mm-hmm. You could talk about your grandbaby. I might bring up a story about Michaela that you may never heard, but I tried to really create that space where people felt that it was okay to bring Michaela up. They didn't want to bring her up, all those things. So I would bring her up and then we're like, oh, we can bring her up. Yes, please. Let's talk about it. Let's talk what's going on with your babies, those kinds of things. And that's the hard part. And everyone, your journey will not be the same. You might not be the one that will be the driver, but I will say, test it out. And I promise you that you will see some people, there will be a relief over them when you say to them, it's okay. Like, why you ain't told me nothing about the baby since 3 months ago. I ain't heard nothing. They scared. They think bringing up their child or their child that's in college, maybe your child passed away while they were a teenager. They don't want to offend. And so I never wanted to be seen as a victim, nor did I want to play that role. So I really worked to just create that space where we were like, we family, we friends, you don't have to, that's not going to help me. You not talking about your family and your life is not going to help me. That's actually going to make me go into isolation because you're not talking about your family. Now, I'm not going to talk about mine. We're going to get together. It's going to be artificial. No. And sometimes we might even have to sit there and cry together. And you do that a couple of times, and now everybody cool with it. Be like, okay, girl, we're about to cry. Wait a minute. Let me give you a little ass. But you got to do it, get out of your comfort zone and do it a couple of times. And then, and I'm talking about those people that's your circle. So if you have some friends, my advice, and you feel like they've been kind of quiet, I'm sure it's because they don't know what to say. They don't know what to say.
Ms. Tremelle,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you so much for sharing this. Is there any final words? Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, first I was going to say thank you for having me on. I really, I appreciate it. I don't take these invitations lightly. And I would just encourage people to know that we can't get through this world alone. And so, I've been talking about this village, having this village, friends, and village may sound very large. It doesn't have to be. And you might be, Tisha and I talked about this earlier. You might be someone who say, I don't have a whole lot of friends. I just moved to Georgia. I don't have any friends. Start today. And, I think that there's a verse in the Bible that talks about he who wants to be friends has to be friendly.
Oh, child.
You're friendly, and it could just, you don't have to have people over your house. Y'all can go have coffee, go grab a bite to eat, start there, go to church, go to a show. This is Atlanta. We're in Atlanta. What we just gonna say, go to brunch. We love the brunch now. Start off small and just build. You can build today. And if you already have that village, just plug into them and do you. Whether it's, maybe get into exercise and do something for yourself, for your mental health, your physical well-being, and And don't forget your spiritual well-being, because we started off talking about that. I know I'm sitting here today because I had a relationship with God, and it helped me in some ways that I can't articulate, and that probably sounds weird to folks who may not be spiritual, but having that grounding, having people who I also knew loved God and who were checking on me, um, that made all the difference.
What I would say, Tremelle, is you never know what's going on in someone's life, and the power to lean into God and do your own work. And, people really are a reflection of the church. And what I can say is that as long as I've known you, that you have practiced what you've preached. And you have, for me personally, held space for me, have held open the door to sisterhood. It was not something that I was used to. I wanted to isolate. And you're like, nah, girl, come on. Um, and that really has been transformative and life-changing. And actually, that relationship has a lot to do with why we're here right now. So I want to just say thank you and say to sisters who really are struggling or don't have that sense of support, that don't have that those sister friends or even that community, what I would say is the community is waiting for you. All you need to do is allow, yourself to step in that space. There are good people. Many of us come from families that are not as solid as the one that Tremelle has described, but there are families there that are welcoming you into the space and welcome you into healing and welcoming you into God and the church. And no matter what you've gone through, there is a lady, there's a space, there's a community that can support you through that. And I just want to say again, thank you for joining us here at the Midlife Makeover Movement. And I pray that your words, your encouraging words that God has used, something that you never wanted to happen for yourself, as a space for someone else to heal and grow, and for them to help heal and grow another. So again, thank you for joining us. Please like, share, and comment. We have some more sisters. And get still standing. You can see mine's all tabbed up. There's some good stuff in here for you. And you do not have had to have lost a child to get some good nuggets out of that. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
Thank
go
you.
to my website, which is just my first name, Tremelle.com.
All right, Tremelle.com. And we will put in the show notes how you can get this book. And thank you so much, Tremelle. We'll talk to you
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you for having me.